Vedic astrology, operates with the understanding that the solar system is mapped in our brain cortexes. So whenever planets move, they don't move out there. That is in the domain of Maya. Just as any of you in this room and environment, in relation to myself as observer, exist outside of my field of perception. All this is in the domain of space-time, and that is in the domain of illusory by nature, appearance-like. Whereas in reality, all this exists nowhere but within my own awareness. Moreover, as it exists within my own awareness, my neurophysiology here is that where it is all mapped. So in other words, I here, even in physical manifestation, carry the entirety of the universe, just like every single one of you. Everywhere. Through your bones, through your marrow, through everything, reproductive fluids, through saliva, everything. There's something there that reflects the entire cosmos perfectly intact. So when planets move, they don't move out there. It is a matter of speech. They move in our cortexes. I'll speak to something which I said at the beginning of our gathering that is relevant, and I simply want to bring few pointers, rather, linking, let's say, spiritual inquiry, sadhana, our lives, right, with the astrological cycles. So before anyone who hears this, or those who yet to hear this later, get surprised, like what astrology has to do. In fact, in many circles I've heard astrology has been discarded, right? It's not worthy of being spoken in the context of non-dual teachings. I've heard these perspectives. Of course, I've heard also a lot of perspectives that everything can be discarded in non-dual teachings. What we eat, air we breathe, company we keep, all this is irrelevant. As long as you're aware of awareness, then you're bust, you know? I mean, everything can just be a second kind of, importance. Well, turns out to be not so. Vedic culture is adamant about it because everything is interconnected, interrelated. So therefore, there are branches of Vedic wisdom, and the branches of Vedic wisdom contains and covers absolutely all areas, all spheres. Spheres pertinent to individual life, individual cycles, which, for example, is the domain of Ayurveda. Spheres pertinent to the way we live, how we live, where we live. It's the domain of Vastu, or Sthapatya Veda. Spheres pertinent to, let's say, larger cycles that is governed by planets. That's Jyotish, okay, or Vedic astrology. And there are 40 branches of Vedic wisdom, 40 altogether, each dealing with specific aspects of how creative intelligence expresses itself as the entirety of the cosmos and through the entirety of our neurophysiology. This is what makes us truly cosmic, and in a way, to me, to my understanding, that's a true meaning of non-duality. If something is truly non-dual, if we speak about it as a true monism, that as above, so below, or as below, so above, if it can be found out there, it can certainly be found here, then that principle should somehow translate into a way we are. It cannot be just purely on intellectual, mental level without consideration that what is our physiology? What is our neurophysiology? How do we function in terms of functionality of this body? And so Tantra is rooted in Vedic sciences. And in Tantra, there are many, many different branches. In fact, just for your further interest, at the root of all the Vedic, of all the 40, let's say, Vedic aspects, there are 4 principal Vedas: Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Samved, and Athar Veda. Anglicized were Atharva, Rig Veda, and so forth, right? 4 Vedas, 4 principal Vedas. The Rig Veda, of course, is the most known, because the Rig Veda is that, let's say, what has been for a long time mistakenly considered by Indologists, some kind of mythological compositions made with a very vague dating. They never located the exact date of when the Rig Veda was written, because Rig Veda was not written on a spot. It is now confirmed by scholars, both of East and West, that it took potentially thousands of years for the entirety of Rig Veda to be composed, because each of the mandala of Rig Veda is authored by different rishis. And we know from historical accounts that these rishis, some of these rishis, left hundreds of years apart from each other. This is astonishing fact. And Rig Veda, of course, here is the sum total of all other Vedas. And what is Rig Veda? Rig Veda is the humming reverberance, vibrations, finest vibrations that express themselves as this human physiology. Through each and every vertebra, there is a whole science how each sukta in Rig Veda corresponds to a particular vertebra in a human spine. So the human spine here is the cosmic instrument that vibrates in unison with creation. So this is a very important understanding, that the non-duality proper is not that like somehow going into the recesses of mental activity and being behind the observer, going into that, let's say, continued, let's say, recession into ad infinitum, be aware of awareness. Well, what about being aware of the one who is aware of the one who is aware? And that who is aware of that one who is aware, then there's another one who is aware. It becomes ridiculous. Whereas all this is happening here and now. Somehow it all expressed, that awareness already expresses itself beautifully through this neurophysiology. So this is very important, and I felt maybe for those of you who either interested, fascinated, curious about Vedic astrology, or those of you who feel, well, you know, like less important, it's secondary, let alone those who consider Vedic astrology as irrelevant. And I know some of those who consider themselves like fully enlightened, and they dismiss Vedic astrology as being just unimportant when it comes to the business of self-realization, for example. Okay, we'll leave this for a moment, whether it is crucial or not. If we understand that our neurophysiology is a perfectly mapped cosmos, then Vedic astrology operates with the understanding that the solar system is mapped in our brain cortexes. So whenever planets move, they don't move out there. That is in the domain of Maya. Just as any of you in this room and environment, in relation to myself as observer, exist outside of my field of perception. Just like that is true in reverse. For each and every one of you, this what exists outside of you is in the domain of that Maya, in the domain of that what seems like I'm here and you are there. Whether you are here closer than that building or that tree, but you are still outside of myself, let alone my current hermitage somewhere in the island of Majorca or another continent, let alone another planet, right? All this is in a domain of space-time, and that is in a domain of illusory by nature, appearance like. Whereas in reality, all this exists nowhere but within my own awareness. Moreover, as it exists within my own awareness, my neurophysiology here is that where it is all mapped. So in other words, I here, even in physical manifestation, carry the entirety of the universe, just like every single one of you. Everywhere. Through your bones, through your marrow, through everything, reproductive fluids, through saliva, everything. There's something there that reflects the entire cosmos perfectly intact. So when planets move, they don't move out there. It is a matter of speech. They move in our cortexes. So when Mercury goes retrograde, it is not because Mercury is the closest to the Sun, and the mass of Mercury as a planet is mostly metal. So it's a very heavy planet. And it does 3 times around the Sun compared to, in comparison to one circumambulation of the Earth around the Sun. So therefore Mercury goes retrograde, as most of you know, approximately 3 times a year for duration of approximately 21 days, 3 weeks. During that time, when the so-called planet going retrograde, it is retrograding in our cortexes, because the planet Mercury, in Sanskrit Buddhi, corresponds to that aspect what Buddhi represents. Buddhi represents our intellect. I will just allow a little kind of allusion very quickly to bridge, let's say, different cultures. Mercury, as a planet, as you know, is a Roman rendering of the ancient Greek god Hermes, who, as you know, was the postman of gods. He is the messenger with his wing sandals, right? And that particular kind of a funky hair, funky hat. So the job of Hermes is to communicate the higher will of the divine beings, whose will is much greater, to those of us earthlings who are subordinate to that greater will. Greater will he is exemplified simply by the greater cosmic cycles than our own individually measured cycles. What our own individually measured cycles are? They're measured by the planet Moon, which stands for the mind. And the Moon changes its phases 28 lunar days. So the cycle of the Moon is very fast. Therefore, our thoughts are very fast. And the measure of our thought here, if we are to calibrate that in terms of that, let's say, clock, it's perfectly in sync with the activity of our mind and the phases of the Moon in terms of the full, let's say, power of processing certain information. This can be translated into certain modes we experience emotionally and mentally, which takes up to 2.5 days because of that lunar activity for our mind to be fascinated with something. Then there will be a natural change of mind. In other words, if you are really passionate about something, just wait 2.5 days and it will subside. It's just as simple as that. Whereas other heavenly bodies have much longer duration. So going back to this, for it to be kind of understood in a more, like I would say, even downright scientific way, the way we experience planets is not how they rotate out there in cosmos. In fact, they rotate out there in cosmos in terms of that very old understanding of macrocosmos and microcosmos. So our own reality here is a complete and utter reflection of all the macrocosmic events. So we are not here even a replica, but a simultaneous reality of cosmos. And so therefore planetary activity, properly understood, it's activity in our brain cortexes. It's activity which is happening here. So this is when planet Mercury goes retrograde, that planet which in ancient Greek mythology was representing the power to communicate mortals, the humans, their destiny, right? Through whatever messages that Hermes would deliver, which is then becomes the Roman god Mercury, and the planet whose responsibility is that, precisely that, as it is positioned in close proximity to the orbit of the Sun, which is the sole source of pranic energy in our solar system. Likewise in the body. That very same communications received by each and every one of us during the times when Mercury goes forward or when Mercury goes retrograde. So when Mercury goes retrograde, that astrological way of saying that, obviously planet never moves backwards. It simply moves backwards in relation to the situation of the planet Earth. That's obvious, right? Because it's closer to the Sun, it moves faster around the Sun. The closer to the Sun, the faster. It does 3 circumambulations as opposed to our Earth's one. So therefore 3 retrograde phases, according and from the perspective of the Earth. So when that moment, when, as it were, Mercury speeds up and goes, then there is this kind of stationary point, and it appears as it moving backwards. And that moment is very important by all really kind of, let's say, astrologers who don't want to just tell you what happens, whom you're going to meet, what you're going to eat, because this is secondary. But most importantly, it's the phase of reevaluation. It's the phase to clean the cupboards, to slow down with decisions making. It's very helpful and very simple. Traveling, check your itinerary, this, that. Read the disclaimers, because that's the time when you will, if something important happens, you most likely will not notice that, because Mercury is moving backwards, as it were. So this is just a basic reminder. Now, what I want your attention on is on a very important planetary situation, which is heralded by the movement of Saturn, the planet that slows everything and everyone down. Saturn. It's an important time. We have all entered this earlier this year, particularly with the move of Saturn conjuncting Rahu, which is the north lunar node, on the 29th of March, coinciding with the lunar eclipse, right? So this was the eclipse coinciding with the move of Saturn into Pisces, conjuncting there and then Rahu, who was already in Pisces for a month and a half since January. Why is it significant? And why is it significant to speak about in this setting and in this context? Reasons for that are many. Main reasons are these. Saturn is truly considered to be the planet of all karma. It's literally the guardian of karma. Planet is the Saturn as a planet whose job is to oversee, as it were, as that grand, let's say, whatever that position may be called in cosmos, in our solar system, as an outermost planet. And in terms of its status, even though Jupiter, in Sanskrit known as Guru, is considered to be the planet that represents, let's say, the teacher and the father figure, it is Saturn who really teaches us. It is Saturn who really is considered to be the utmost universal teacher. It's the planet of democracy. It's the planet which does not give a hoot about the roles we as human beings play in this life. It is absolutely important from the point of view of Saturn, social status or strata. You can be Sultan of Brunei, a King of England, or an outcast somewhere, or, somewhere on the outskirts of whatever. Bangladesh or Ghana, doesn't matter. Saturn treats everyone absolutely in the same way, unlike all other planets, mythologically speaking, because its job here is to simply ascertain that everyone does their respective roles properly, and the one and only role, truly speaking, is that of soul's evolution. All other roles are just like costumes. There's only one real job and role that we play here, is the role of maturation of our soul. And Saturn does that. So therefore, at the superficial level, every astrologer, Eastern, which is based on zodiac, Western, which is based on zodiac, or Vedic, which is based on one is, as you know, Sadril, right? And another one is, what is it called? Yeah, tropical. So it's the difference between the tropical and Sadril. So in Vedic, there is that difference between the treatment of the planets in their respective positions is such that tropical one almost shifts all houses 1 degree, which makes this a discrepancy for people who begin to show interest in Vedic astrology, because if one born Leo, for example, but then Vedic astrology will make them, for example, a Cancer very often. Depends, of course, where they are. And so forth for every single sign. Not always. It can be also, you can be Leo, both in the tropical zodiac or in Vedic astrology. It happens. It has to be coinciding within, let's say, certain dates of your birth. So according to Vedic astrology, Saturn moved into Pisces. According to tropical astrology, Saturn moved into Aries, as you know. And we speaking about here with regard to the Vedic astrology. So Saturn's move to Pisces here signifies completion of a long 30-year-long cycle. So, as you know, astrological cycle consists of 30 years. It starts in Aries and is completed in Pisces. It comprises a full 30-year cycle. Most of us, if human life today is measured, that, let's say, very, very approximate line, let's say 75 years, I don't know what's the basic, then there would be only 2 phases and a half of that. Rarely some of us will experience 3 phases, and one would have to live to the 90th, right? So this 30-year cycle here represents the full scope of what the astrology cycle represents. In Aries, we are reborn from the cosmic waters, where our identity is, as it were, being redefined. Please follow attentively here. This part is very interesting and important. It's, as it were, in Aries, right? We are given the chance, propensity, and impetus to define who we are. So this, among the astrologers, and I'm not an astrologer, I'm just not even an amateur, I'm just sharing with you what I know. But every astrologer, if you will consult, will tell you the qualities of Arians, right? Fearless, ready, like jumping on a gun, right? You have friends, or you have, like some, let's say, Aries strong in you, rising or ascendant, or like born. You know what I'm talking about, right? It's the planet, the war bringer, right? It's like Aries here is exemplified by the ram, right? This, that creature which is like headbutts everything, and it has properly equipped with that. So it has this force, rawness to it, determination. And it's required because we're entering the cycle. In Pisces, cycle is completing itself. In Pisces, our individuality meant to rest. Individuality in Pisces is, as it were, being dissolved or given an opportunity to be dissolved in the cosmic waters of creation. That's what Pisces as a sign represents. It's a dreamy sign. It's a sign which is not, it's less preoccupied with personal ambitions. It is preoccupied with cosmic state of affairs. It is known for these qualities. And Saturn here, entering Pisces, forms a formidable combination, which very often than not experienced by us as not an easy one, because this marks 2.5 year period, because that's how long Saturn will remain in Pisces now, before it will move on January, I believe, 28th, and the new astrological cycle begin with the move of Saturn into Aries. What does it mean? You can already now intuit and put this together. In other words, we live at the end of one astrological cycle, which basically 30 years. Some of you are even too young to know what it means, because you don't have reference point if you are, let's say, younger than 30. Or even if you happen to be 31 or 32, you were too little to remember. But those of you who are old enough can cast a look back and see where you were 30 years ago in your life. Just literally rewind and look into exact year 30 years ago. Where were you in your status, aspirations, intentions, all of this, in terms of your whereabouts, in terms of you being single, being with someone, what jobs, occupations, intentions, how did you express yourself, where you wanted to go. All this is now time to look at it, look back and see what this cycle was. For those who have that, as it were, possibility because you had lived enough. For those of you who have not, do not worry. You are given an opportunity, because it is in Pisces, to get access at the very subtle intuitive level where your soul longing was. In some cases, if let's say some of you 25, anyone? I'm sure there's quite a few young faces here. 25? 26. Anyone else under 30? 26? 28? 25, right? Anyone younger than that? That will do. So in other words, 30 years ago, right, you were not around. You were not around. So, and yet, cosmically speaking, that cycle is still intact. So information may come to you in your dreams, in your meditations, in the broad daylight when you are in that, let's say, less mundane state of consciousness, where you will have these insights into your past life, insights into your previous incarnation, even if in terms of pure intention of how you wanted to express yourself in this life. These are all gifts of Saturn and Pisces. But of course, these gifts come at a price, because what Saturn will do in Pisces, it slows everything down. Because that's required for reevaluation. So in other words, a helpful comparison here can be made, which was made earlier with regard to the activity of the mind, which it is in sync with the movement of the planet Moon, and what we experience on a daily basis, right? Down to what do I make for breakfast, what I'm going to have for lunch, who am I going to see in the afternoon, this activity, that activity, all this belongs to the mental activity, and so checked by the phases of the moon and an accompanying, let's say, flavor, accompanying quality of emotional experience, right? Like there will be something, maybe you are like, the blue days, like more melancholic, less talkative, right? Or you are like all upbeat, let's put our best dress, red shoes, let's go and rock it, let's go and let's dance. Let's put red shoes, like David Bowie and just hit the floor, dance floor. Or you are like, you want to go in nature and have sandwiches, picnic. Or you want to treat yourself for some nice posh, I don't know, whatever, souffle somewhere. Whatever you want to do, all measured by a certain mode. What we're talking about, that mode. Mode. Here, the mode is stretched to 2.5 years. All of us, individually, will enter a certain mode. We're already entering this mode. Many of you already sense that, if you're sensitive enough. Some of us resist that. Some of us don't want to enter that. And we'll speak about it in a moment. Those who sense it already, they are meeting that halfway through, or at least at the beginning, welcoming that. One way or another, that mode that otherwise pertinent to mental activity, which is the expression of the lunar cycle, lasts only hours, maximum 2.5 days. Here it will be stretched for 2.5 years. So there would be a certain something hanging. Whatever you do, it's hanging here. You're going to go, red shoes, you want to hit the dance floor. It's not the same how it used to be. I mean, they're getting old, or the DJ is not the same, or the musical tastes are changing. Like something is not working. I'm not having this. I'm not having the same kick. I'm not having the same buzz. Saturn is not interested neither in red shoes, nor in dance floor. Doesn't matter who is the DJ. David Guetta, it doesn't matter. It absolutely scoffs at all. For Saturn, there's only one job. Job be done. That's what Saturn is about. So any one of us who already, let's say, forgive me that kind of like now I'm start to preach, doing your Dharma, right, in Dharma, then you kind of like suddenly find yourself in your own element, because that's what Saturn is. If you're doing your duty, if you are what you're meant to do, what you're born to do, this is going to be a beautiful time. Beautiful time where introversion, which is always, of course, indispensable aspect of Saturn, would not be felt as imprisonment, as depression. It will be lit within. That glow, that sweetness, that what makes sadhana. If there's tapas, one can never be born from spiritual practice. It only comes when there's a lack of tapas. Tapas is that ardor, that what cooks us inside, that glow. You can sit on the snow and melt it with your butt because you have tapas. This is what this really is. For most of us, unfortunately, picture will be different. For most of us want to continue with our enterprise, with how we all market it, we planned it, we've got a business plan, we've got this plan, I've got to this, I've got to the and all this, and also the TikTok and the Instagram page has to all align, and I have to do this. Suddenly we'll start feeling it's not zesty enough, not spicy enough, something is lacking. Formula is tried, it's all supposed to work. All impact of Saturn. And it's all in Pisces. Fish. Silent communication. Fish doesn't give a toss about our yap, or how we are, me too, or and what we do on social media. It communicates through the heart only. Its language is not what is uttered. This is the beauty of Saturn in Pisces. In Pisces, spiritual transmission finally will be for what it is. All this yapping of non-duality will be like a deja vu, like something we yawn when we hear that, because that's not where the transmission is. We suddenly begin to get in touch with the deepest sense of intuition, because that's also all in the domain of most watery of all the astrological, let's say, phases and signs like Pisces represent. So the interesting aspect that Saturn and Pisces represent is that we now, as a collective, obviously we spoke about it with regard to individual life's aspirations, yearnings and wantings. But of course all this is relevant in terms of how it's going to be reflected in the world of us where we share this reality. And in the world of shared reality, we are literally given a chance to come up with a new narrative. Old narrative dissolves in Pisces. Therefore, we have seen now the signs of collapse of absolutely everything. We've seen that in the last couple of years. Some argue since pandemic, since Russian-Ukrainian conflicts and that proxy war, since the, let's say, events of the further, let's say, occupation of Gaza. We have seen the charade of what is happening out there in the world. We have seen the collapse of absolutely everything that if there was a last straw of our faith in something that is done out of the goodness of the heart by those in a position of power, in my books, all broke. That last straw that broke the camel's back. There's no one we can rely on except our own selves in terms of what's happening to this world. Every institution shows its impotence. Every political government shows it is bankrupt and completely and utterly, or either bankrupt or totally loony, totally balloony, not even stupid. Like what countries in Europe did to themselves throughout this proxy war is absolutely astonishing. Astonishing. Just like all it requires to just wipe the eyes, the cold water, and look, But of course, the war for your brains it's out there. The war for the brains is constantly. And the algorithm will feed only that what we want to see, only that what we want to hear. Algorithm is merciless. You want to see the rosy picture, only rosy picture will be thrown. You want to see only this side, you will see only this side. And it feels comforting to wake up for one's coffee, and yes, the world is, yes, this bloody injustice, these bloody Arabs, these bloody terrorists, oh my God, another movie for Holocaust, please. I want to feel guilty, And the list goes on and on and on, we want to reshuffle all the skeletons. We want to have new Hitler, new Stalin, because it makes us feel like truly there's a threat. We need to spend $1 trillion now in the United States for, we want to make sure that, of course, I don't want to paint a bleak picture. What I do want to point out is that in all this charade is on display. And in the next 2.5 years, all these entrails will be out. Nothing can be hidden anymore, because that's the beauty of the end of the one cycle, of this cycle. And it also coincides with the greater cosmic cycle. The greater cosmic cycle that is here represented by what has been spoken about in my experience as far back as late 90s, where by the year 2028, where Saturn will be ready to move into the next sign, and the new cycle will be ready to unfold. We're entering the window of a golden age during the Kali Yuga. This has been prophesied independently by different cultures, by those, let's say, prophetic oracles of the Native Americans. This has certainly been spoken about by Jyotish astrologers who cast these maps way ahead of time. I had that in a TM movement, circa 1998, or maybe more like on a break of the 1999, like just before the break into the 21st century, when this was spoken, that in the year 2028, and this is, we're speaking about before all this what we lived through, that we're entering very, very difficult time collectively, very difficult time, challenging time. And that's where the possibility for coming up with the new reality. How does new reality come up? It comes up when there is a possibility for having new intentions completely forged out of our own awareness to be lived, to be experienced collectively. So this is why I wanted to relate that in the context of this setting. And another important and significant addition to this is that Saturn conjuncts Rahu. Briefly, Rahu represents the north node of the lunar eclipse. So imagine there is a north and a south node where moon eclipsed, as it were, respectively. Mythologically, it is spoken of in terms of how these nodes were created, is that the cosmic serpent was beheaded, and the place where the head was severed from the rest of the body begin to represent Rahu and Ketu in Sanskrit. They are not planets, technically speaking, but they are treated in Vedic astrology as planets, as grahas, and referred to and spoken of as planets having energy of the planets. Even though when there is no eclipse, Rahu, Ketu, we could say, does not exist, right? They only exist in potentiality, which is actualized only when the actual eclipse takes place. Yes or no? And yet, we know, and even the tropical zodiac astrologers will agree, that the impact of eclipses is not a day affair. The impact of eclipses lingers prior to the eclipse, shadow phase, and after the eclipse. Very often, it can linger as long as weeks and months on end, certainly until the next eclipse. So therefore, it is, in Vedic astrology, Rahu and Ketu treated as planets in terms of the energetic qualities. Rahu represents a severed head. This is where all our desires, unimpeded aspirations for experiencing life for what it is in its utmost is placed. This is what Rahu represents. Rahu is this Rahu is this bodiless head. All it wants to do is to experience. It wants to experience, and it's literally no end to its desire for experiencing. And Ketu is the headless body, that what is severed. And Ketu is a past life memories. Ketu is where all past experiences are stored. All past life experiences are there in Ketu. So between Rahu, north, and Ketu, south nodes, a karmic axis is formed. Karmic axis, the most important, I would say, pointers in your personal astrological configuration. Because it's not literally what will happen in your life, as most of us, let's admit, want to know somehow. You know, I'm gonna do well in life, I'm gonna have good partner, children in some cases, these jobs, profession, fame, success. We all wanna know, like, all this is immaterial when it comes to Rahu-Ketu axis. Rahu-Ketu axis only represents lessons we came to learn here. So it is much more, in a way, I would say, universal in its message than, oh, this transit, Venus transit, enjoy love, l'amour, right? And Mars is transiting, whoa, let's go start war, you know, start some enterprise. You know, Jupiter's transiting, go shopping, man, just like expand, you know, travel. Saturn comes, you know, it's like Sadasati, 7.5, geez, you know, run for cover. But Rahu-Ketu literally points out, and it is spoken of as karmic axis, because it literally creates that axis. So in other words, where is your Rahu? In which lunar constellation? In which lunar nakshatra in Sanskrit it is called? And where your Ketu? In which nakshatra? If you look at the clock would be like, you know, on the watch or the clock, it's like literally 12:06. See? And then if it's 5 to 12, then it will be 25 past. You understand, right? So in other words, that karmic axis rotates and moves in correspondence to that, what forms that axis. So the current karmic axis, where Rahu is positioned, is formed by Pisces and, who is knowledgeable here in astrology? Virgo, exactly, right? Because that's right opposite of that. It's in the south of Pisces. So therefore, that's what's playing itself out right now. All the qualities, all the Piscean qualities are compensated, balanced out, must be, by the qualities represented by Virgo. And likewise, all the qualities represented by Virgo, right, that kind of like real strict code of conduct, right, that punctuality, this kind of, you know, all these qualities, Virgovian qualities that are very, very known, you know, this very mental, very intellectual, rational approach, are all balanced out by the dreamy, imaginary, sort of out of this world Piscean qualities. And that's what forms the axis. So this axis is where the whole thing takes place. The last set of eclipses we went through at the beginning of this year, just a short while ago, lunar and a solar one, called as a corridor of eclipses, heralds the completion of that karmic axis formed by Pisces and Virgo, Pisces, Virgo, with Rahu in Pisces, Ketu in Virgo. Now, most of us can do this assessment with regard to our personal life. The full cycle of represented by Rahu lasts 18 years. Right? This astrological sign, which is the rotation of Saturn through all the signs, is 30 years. The Rahu's cycle is 18 years. So the karmic axis here, full karmic axis, is duration of 18 years. Wind back now in time, where were you, each and every one of you, 18 years ago? Doesn't have to be exact time, date. The window is, where does it take us? 2005 to 2006, isn't it? No. 2007. That's 18, right? Are we calculating correctly? Yeah? So that phase is what gives us now. You can look back and see where were you in terms of your aspirations, your life, and this points out, because this is a complete and utter repeat of that karmic axis. 18 years ago, Rahu was in Pisces, Ketu was in Virgo, 18 years ago. In that window, what we all lived individually and collectively during that time, in that window of a year and a half phase, which is the shift of the karmic axis, that's what will give you an indication in terms of your life, which is here represented by the karmic axis, formed by Rahu and Ketu. You can literally see, if you have diaries, if you have if you paid attention, where were you during that year? Where were you? What were you up to? What were you decided to do? What were you planning? What were you intending? And then there is a half of that cycle. Why? Because that's the time when Ketu was in Pisces and Rahu was in Virgo, and that's 9 years ago. So where does that take us? 9 years ago. Which date? 2016, right? Let's start, we could include 2015 here, because it's a year and a half. So 2015, 2016, where were you? Where were you? In your aspirations, in your desires, in your intentions. Desires above all else. Rahu rules desires. Rahu is here what guides our actions, and what propels us in the direction of this or that, because it's its purpose. You see? So, Vedically speaking, the Saturn conjuncting Rahu creates some call a curse-like situation, because Saturn doesn't care about desires, and Rahu is all about desires. And Rahu in Pisces, right, before the 29th of March, had a great time. Literally, Rahu in Pisces. Rahu is that what makes you go swoon completely. It's intoxication. He's like richly serving some stuff, whatever he's serving. Whatever he's serving makes you drunk, makes you high, right? And in Pisces, impact is magnified many times over, okay? And of course, it's like we all get swelled and swooned and what have you in that state, Not until the Papa Saturn comes home and catches the party halfway through, and really, really we see that this is going to be downtime. It's like literally that kind of situation where that's where we are all caught. Rahu in Pisces had a blast of a time, right? And then suddenly this checkpoint, boom, doors open, right? Saturn doesn't need to have even the keys. Comes in and creates this very, very different situation. Some astrologers, of course, paint very gloomy picture, and even there is a term went in circulation, some call it a Shrapit yoga. Astrological combinations are also called yogas. No, not yoga as a yoga in Hatha yoga or the other yoga. It's a yoga, combinations formed by certain planets. In your birth chart, you can have some yogas that are There are 200 most important 300 most important yogas. But Shrapit yoga is not to be found in those, so therefore the hair is being split, and there are those, I share that perspective, that it is kind of stretched to call it Shrapit yoga as a curse, because it's literally translated as a curse. Like it's like something is cursed here. What Shrapit yoga really means is that the presence of Saturn in Rahu, and in this case Saturn is the greater planet, right? Therefore it conjuncts Rahu. It prompts the surfacing of some of our past actions, including those from even previous incarnations, which are now to be paid off. It's as simple as that. It's something we have to pay now. It's like an unexpected bill arrives, like we thought it's all covered and it suddenly whoop through the door, So that's, like to consider it a curse. Well, if someone wants to consider it a curse, paying bills, it's always a good thing. It's setting affairs clean, okay? It's sometimes a very good thing to do. And another silver lining to that, which is I also prefer to look at that way, Saturn conjuncting Rahu, is that what otherwise would create the propensity for some kind of creation of trajectory, which is what Rahu is best at, towards certain, let's say, often unattainable goals driven by certain, let's say, deeply hidden propensity for enjoying, really, because that's what Rahu is all about. It wants to party. That's what Rahu is. And the balancing act here is where the Ketu is, of course, you see? But the presence of Saturn, it's like Rahu is this, let's say, raw diamond, best kid on the block, right? But he's arrogant, untrained, full of poop, right? Full of arrogance. And Saturn could be spoken of as this old, wise sensei. He comes, he spots the guy, he sees he's talented, he sees he's ambitious, he sees all that possibility, and he tells him, so, okay, you're doing this, that, it's fine, let's try to do something else. And at first, like, Rahu huffs and puffs, like, who are you? But he feels like it's better to do like this, right? And so that becomes a formidable combination. Rahu is get trained by Saturn. So this is a rare, rare opportunity for our true ambitions, for our true aspirations to get a proper direction by Saturn. And Saturn here represents, of course, why is it considered in Indian spiritual tradition as the most spiritual planet? Even in its outlook, Saturn looks like Shiva in its attributes. In the story of Saturn, in the myth of Saturn, every planet comes and every planet is represented by a king. And every king arrives on the chariot, and every king shines with all the rubies and diamonds and glory and gold and what have you. They all like come, and it's just like cannot look at them. They're just so glittery. And when Saturn arrives, as he arrives the last, because that's how Saturn is, he comes all in drags, matted locks, long hair, completely, he doesn't care how he looks. And of course, he spoils the whole entire party. He spoils the whole thing there. Well, that's how it is. Everyone is just dreaded by his presence. But then, of course, we learn why Saturn is here the true planet healer. It's true. In Vedic astrology, there's no Heron, as you know, those of you that, right? No, there's no presence of these outer planets. So Saturn performs these roles of, it's the cosmic healer of the soul, you see? And finally, to conclude all this, the importance of Saturn in Pisces is because it brings and restores the Dharma of teaching. As has been mentioned, Piscean region represents the ultimate teaching, right? The Pisces represent the realm of ultimate teaching because it is transpersonal. The teacher that teaches in the Piscean energy is his energy and the message is universal and transpersonal. Doesn't matter what form it takes. In essence, it is transpersonal. Every other aspect carries some traces of personality. This trace, that trace. So Piscean quality, therefore, is considered to be that where, let's say, the ultimate test of every teacher. And Saturn here quadruples that effect because Saturn's presence in Pisces brings and flushes to the surface all fake gurus, all fake teachers, all those who trespass the territory. And had its way all this time, they will experience pangs of insecurity, the complex of, what is it called? When we somehow deep inside know that we don't know, but we pretend we do. What is it called? Imposter syndrome. All this would be on a rise. And this will purify the field, because that's what Saturn came here to do, to purify the field. The slate needs to be cleaned. All this stuff needs to be skimmed. All this will become floating to the surface. All these teachers who took this upon themselves, all these teachers and gurus, doesn't matter how many followers they have, how famed they are, how rich they are, how illustrious they are, how eloquent they are, all this will float to the surface and mercilessly cleaned by Saturn as this, pool cleaner in Pisces. All this will be like muck thrown out. And not by virtue of having to do anything as calling a bluff. It will create internal turmoil. We established that this is where the planets are. So many teachers will quit. Many people who kind of like took upon themselves that mantle or enters those shoes will actually quit on their own. They will simply realize and find excuse or simply confess or what have you. And we will witness that in these 2.5 years. And that's the extraordinary time in terms of the spiritual scene, which has been dominated and gradually and systematically polluted by that what otherwise requires now reevaluation. And this is the beauty of Saturn in Pisces, because it prepares. Before we come into the next cycle, it must be done. We cannot enter the new cycle if there is all this kind of, this is the spring cleaning, grand cleaning. And that's the job of Saturn, to restore the Dharma. The field of Dharma cannot be restored if those who, let's say, appointed themselves to uphold Dharma teach from a place which is not secured, licensed from that where the teaching proceeds from. It's as simple as that. And of course, Saturn, who is the keeper of all the karmas, who is the guardian of Dharma, does just that. It exerts that psychological pressure. Just read the story of Saturn translated by Robert Svoboda. It's an indispensable book for everyone who goes through Sadhasati anyway. Beautifully translated by Robert. And you will understand that analogy, that translation in what Saturn does is compared to this, how the seeds are crushed into oil. The seed of soul, the soul as a seed contains the precious substance. But for it to release that substance, it needs to be crushed. And that's what Saturn does. That's cosmic discs come together and crushing those seeds. So the pure oil flows out, extra virgin, cold pressed. So we didn't have time. I didn't want to leave this because it was promised again. I pay great tribute to those Russian-speaking Vedic astrologers who carry their Dharma in pure, as far as I can understand and hear, fashion with regard to this job, because this information comes from several sites. Primarily one, when Saturn is in Pisces, from one particular website. If some of you speak Russian, we will share the link. I could not find equal information in any English channels. And I went through about 30 different, including those with whom I even studied astrology. It somehow was either going this way, that way, not talking about the very, very essence of what this astrologer spoke. So this is spoken in acknowledgement and tribute to this astrology. And the astrology of that Russian side doesn't even list his name, because it's done in a pure fashion of the science of astrology. He simply shares this knowledge as a part of the Vedic Academy in Russia. Okay? The Rahu in Pisces is a collection of various different sources which were then synthesized and presented. I first shared this with the Sangha, with our team, of which, of course, you're free to share, because those were nearly hour-long messages, right? One for the Saturn in Pisces only, and one Saturn and Rahu in Pisces. Those were audio messages. But I felt it would be good to bring this out into the open. Why? Because, and this is I'm not closing this, we will close it this evening. If you ask me, and I have been witnessing and hearing, including my own students coming up, like getting tired from all the sadhana, getting bored, getting, all that. Stick with that, man or woman. Stick with that. Why? Right now it becomes more important than ever. Because sadhana, in the next 2.5 years, you pave yourself a full cycle of 30 years. You paint your own heaven. Don't you want to use the best colors? Where can you take them from? From what repository? You can't paint colors of heaven with bile, can you? No. No, with the stuff that settles somewhere down in liver? No. No, with mucus? I'm speaking allegorically. So paint it with prana, and that's what the sadhana is. Increase of prana. Increase of that accumulation of that. Accumulate that pranic currents so that you become that reservoir of that pranic force. And so this 2.5 years is literally nothing to hold on to other than your own self. Because it's not going to be easy. We're going through the major reevaluation. And in doing so, particularly those of you who are in your 20s, you set yourself up for almost for the rest of your life. I wish you to live 100+ years. In any case, you are eternal beings. So it's really only relatively speaking. But even those, let's say, earthly years in this body, right? Isn't it worth living them in dignity and grace? I think so.